1626 total victory. 1626 total victory. Due to the bitterness between Yi Futian and Yi Tianyu, there was no reason for him not to kill him. They were already lifelong enemies. Why would have any scruples about doing this? So by not killing him, he was showing incredible disdain for him. This kind of disdain towards Yi Tianyu, who had once been called an ultimate talent, would be an unimaginable humiliation. But reality was indeed that cruel. Once again, the winners wrote the history books. He had not even been able to withstand a single spear thrust. In this battle, all the other forces besides the Heavenly Mandate dynasty of the Heavenly Mandate realm had stood on Yi Futian's side. When they saw the spear thrust, they had felt many conflicting emotions. After that spear thrust, the Heavenly Mandate realm truly had a number one junior, one whom no one could compete with. If Yi Tianyu could not even withstand a single spear thrust from him, who could compete with him? The young master was gone, and the Run Huang of the martial god clan would never return. Ever since Gu Tianxing fell, the Heavenly Mandate realm had fallen behind the other realms, and there was no one within it who could stand among the most powerful figures. But now in the younger generation, Yi Futian had the potential to stand at the top. Would this affect the entire Heavenly Mandate realm? The demon clan thought back to the prophecy from years ago. Could it have had to do with Yi Futian? Yi Futian swept his gaze over Yi Man, then said coldly, "For the sake of letting the divine palace keep face, I won't deal with you. Get out of here. Get out of here." Yi Man went pale. As a princess of the Snow Divine Kingdom, who had been sent to the Shangxiao Divine Palace, she had never been humiliated like that. She had never had someone of the same generation as her look at her and tell her to get lost. What was most painful was that she did not even have the right to protest. Letting her go was a form of forgiveness in that he would not kill her. Did she dare refuse? Would she dare to trade her life to keep her honor? She did not, and so she kept her mouth shut, despite how hard it was. Looking at Yi Tianyu, she felt a burst of sadness. She and him had been heroes at the Divine Palace, envied by countless people. But now they had come to such a tragic conclusion. It was bitter indeed. Let's go. There was no emotion on Yi Tianyu's face. He walked off into the distance. Everyone could feel his sadness as they watched the retreating figure. Yi Man watched him go as well. The spear thrust must have hurt him badly. She lowered her head, then followed him as he left. There were not many people left from the Heavenly Mandate dynasty and the Divine Snow Kingdom, and many of them had been wounded. They had no more power to fight. They left the battlefield in a desolate manner, as they no longer had the right to keep participating. Yi Futian letting them live was his forgiveness. After they left, Yi Futian looked at the other fights going on. Although the other battlefields were far away, everyone else knew what he had done. When he returned, all eyes would be on him. Everyone would be paying attention to him. There was no doubt that the Run Huang level cultivator from the martial gods clan would not be returning. Yi Futian and Yu Sheng had been able to cut down a Run Huang when they teamed up? How had they done that? The martial gods clan had no more heart to fight. Yu Sheng had cut his way through them like a tiger through a flock of sheep. Everywhere he went, there was no one left behind who could stand. Cultivator after cultivator fell to the ground, crippled. The reason they had not been killed was that Yi Futian did not want it to be so final. So he had asked Yu Sheng to not slaughter them. After all, they could always just leave. So he had left them some leeway. Yi Futian's figure flashed as he moved again. Everyone watched him. Who was he going towards? Golden lightning split the sky, as the spear wrapped in incredibly powerful fighting will struck out again. A figure went flying backward. It was the leader of the martial gods clan Wu Zhan. His body slammed into the mountain behind him, making it shake. Blood streamed from a wound in his chest, as well as from his mouth. His face was pale, and he felt like his internal organs had been cut to pieces. He looked up and saw Yi Futian standing before Yuan Hong. His spear pointed at him. "Do you still want this ritual implement?" he asked. Wu Zhan looked at him, then said resolutely, "I have lost and so I admit defeat. I will take my people and leave." There was no point in continuing to fight. If this had been a fight to the death, he would have already lost his life. The spear thrust that Yi Futian had hit him with could have killed him. Yi Futian pulled back the spear and said, "Go and find another ruin. You may not come back to this one." Wu Zhan nodded. Fine. At this point, he would do whatever Yi Futian said. Whatever happened here from now on had nothing to do with them. The fighting stopped all across the battlefield. All of the cultivators separated. Yi Futian looked down at his own people and said, "If you want to keep pursuing this, you can keep fighting, and I will help you. If not, let's leave it here." In fact, he could perform a terrible slaughter here. But if he did that, there would be endless consequences. After all, he was only one man. If others used this as an excuse to make an enemy of him after he left, he would not let them off easy again. No one said anything. In reality, Yi Futian's people had the upper hand. They were all crushing their opponents and had taken a few casualties. Their opponents had many more dead and wounded. If they stopped fighting, they could end their losses here, making the whole situation a lot less serious for them. On the contrary, if they were the ones with more dead and wounded, they would not be able to stop fighting. But they had had the advantage ever since the beginning of the fight. The Martial Gods Clan's alliance naturally could not say anything. In reality, they had no right to choose. They were the losers, and their fate was in their opponents' hands. Since their opponents were willing to stop fighting, what else could they do but leave in defeat? Many figures turned to leave the battle. Some of them looked dejectedly at the spatial sacred hall. "Wait," called Yi Futian. They all stopped. "Leave all of the treasures that you got in the sacred hall before. You are free to go, but you must leave the spoils of war here," he said with a smile. All the people of the great forces, including the Martial Gods Clan, looked crestfallen. "We got these things before our fight. Why should we leave them?" Wu Zhan stared at Yi Futian. Yi Futian looked at him, and a strange look came over his face. "I am the one who broke the seal," he said. "Why do you want to steal what is rightfully mine?" Had he really asked that? He had lost so badly. And he still had the gall to ask why he should leave his ritual implements? Wu Zhan stared at Yi Futian. Yi Futian's eye twitched, and several lines of cold killing will appeared from his brow. When he saw this, Wu Zhan trembled. He clenched his teeth, pulled out 2 magic weapons, and flew over towards Yi Futian. Then several more ritual implements appeared and fell into his hand. "Benefactor Yi," said the monk from the Xinqing clan with a smile. "We have gotten along fairly well. If you ever find the time to come to the mountain realm, please come visit the Xinqing clan." Yi Futian held out his hands to him in an expectant gesture. "I think you're forgetting something." He had gotten back 2 of the divine arms that he had unlocked. One of them still remained with the Xinqing clan. He had not yet given it back. And yet the monk was speaking of friendship? How could they be friends? "Benefactor Yi, we still have a Run Huang. If this comes to a conflict, I fear it will not go well." The monk was still smiling. The Ren Huang beside him had fought a demon emperor of the Sky Demon Court not long before. The Martial Gods Clan had a Ren Huang too, but he died. Yi Futian was smiling insincerely as well. The monk's mouth twitched, and his smile disappeared slowly. "Do you really want things to come to that point? I will ask you one more time. Will you give it to me or not?" asked Yi Futian with a smile. The monk from the Xinqing clan was silent for a while. Then he pulled out the ritual implement and threw it to Yi Futian. Yi Futian caught it, then nodded in satisfaction. "Take care of yourself, teacher. No need to see me off." The monk left Yi Futian's side, and the other cultivators followed him. Soon they had disappeared off into the distance. The monk from the Xinqing clan has always been said to be insidious and cunning. "He may seem like he's given up, but he might be trouble in the future," said Yuan Hong of the Yuanyang clan to Yi Futian. Although the Xinqing clan had lost a lot of people, they still had their Ren Huang. Judging by their previous attitude, they were still ambitious and unhappy with how things had turned out. Many forces were pulled into this fight. It could have ended in a massive slaughter. "Will the Yuanyang clan be willing to protect me for the sake of the friendship between us?" Yi Futian asked Yuan Hong. Yuan Hong shook his head. "They won't." "Then that's the way it is." Yi Futian smiled and said no more. After all the forces here would make for advantageous allies. Even though some of the cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate realm were his friends, in the end, they were only heirs. If he wanted to really fight other great powers, it would be difficult to get them involved. If he had killed a lot of people here, once he left, many would come to him seeking vengeance. Even though Lord Taixian would help if they all moved against him, would Lord Taixian be enough? Yuan Hong said no more as well. He understood that even Yi Futian would not be able to withstand the Yuanyang clan's wrath if he slaughtered their cultivators. However, if the monk wants to provoke me, next time he won't speak so politely, said Yi Futian. He looked down at the battlefield. Their alliance had won a crushing victory. Thus, the treasures within the spatial sacred hall could be safely taken out. The next step was to divide up the treasure. Beside him, the people from the other great forces looked down with burning gazes. They all had their own expectations. There was a whole hall full of treasure. Even if Yi Futian was stingy, he would still be able to give several treasures to each force. In any case, they had been strong enough to break the seal, which they would not have been on their own. And they had not taken many losses in this battle. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. 1627 Gate. The 1627 Gate. The Yi Futian stepped towards the spatial sacred hall and said, "Come with me." Everyone else followed him expectantly. He was able to break a seal with a single thought. And so the divine arms within the treasure house of the spatial sacred hall would soon be theirs. As they all entered, Yi Futian continued forward saying, "Each force may take 3 divine arms. You go and find them, and I will break the seals for you." He thought to himself that these already very powerful figures were receiving a frighteningly incredible gift here. Every one of the divine arms was earth-shaking. Once they fell into the hands of the top forces, they would increase their power many times. "Please go and take your pick," he said. "Once you have chosen, let me know." Everyone quickly moved off in different directions and began searching through the artifacts. Yi Futian walked up to the bat leaks and said, "Yu Sheng, you go first. You should take the bat leaks." Yu Sheng nodded. "All right." He floated up into the air towards the top of the spatial sacred hall. Yi Futian's eyes changed, and it seemed like he could now see through all illusions. His thoughts swept out through the hall and seemed to form a key for the gate that affected the way the light curtain flowed. A crack appeared in the gate, and the bat leaks began to fly through the air. Boom! Yi Futian was sent flying backward as the bat leaks shot upwards. Yu Sheng's demonic aura surged, and he reached out towards the bat leaks to grasp it. A terrible aura spread out as his body began to tremble slightly. The bat leaks carried him up into the air with it. "It's so powerful," said Do Zhao, his eye twitching. "Don't worry, it's not a problem," said Yi Futian, looking up into the air. The process of obtaining a divine arm was a test in and of itself. "How are you unlocking these things?" he asked Yi Futian. The man had really not explained how. To be able to release them with a single thought was too marvelous. "Do you really think I'm going to tell you?" Yi Futian looked disdainfully at Do Zhao. Do Zhao rolled his eyes. "I want that scepter." Do Zhao pointed towards a scepter sealed away, shining with a divine jade green light. A shockingly powerful life aura was emanating from it. It seemed like it would be able to heal anything in a short amount of time. Yi Futian looked at Do Zhao, then muttered, "You should broaden your horizons." Do Zhao clenched his fists. He had an impulse to hit Yi Futian, but when he saw how he was smiling, his temper abated. Wu Meng of the Martial Gods clan had been killed by him, so he probably should not hit him. Moreover, he was depending on him to unseal the ritual implement. He, the mighty descendant of the fighting god, had lost face for his elders. This must make him the lowest of all the heirs of the Dou tribe in history. "Get ready," said Yi Futian. "All right." Do Zhao, who had just been dejected, suddenly brightened up and looked happy. After all, this would increase his strength. What did his reputation matter? When Yi Futian unsealed the ritual implement, the whole golden spatial sacred hall lit up with jade green light, and a life aura covered everyone. At that moment, everyone felt the life energy and spiritual energy that they had used up while fighting be restored. They all thought that if they could get their hands on that scepter, they would have unlimited recovery ability and could fight until the heavens and fell, and the earth cracked apart. That was a good choice, someone said, looking up at Dou Zhao. The scepter did not have a great amount of repelling force, and so Dou Zhao was able to grasp it without difficulty. Once he had formed a connection with it, he cried out, "Wonderful!" His fighting ability was impressive, and when he used all the sevenfold seals of the fighting god, he was stronger than a Renhuang. But the aftereffects were devastating to him. Now that he had this scepter, he could fight and recover at the same time. Just imagining this made him excited. Xia Qingyuan looked up at the scepter and felt a little bit jealous. She was a cultivator of life energy herself. Everyone used up a lot of power in the last battle, so I am letting them choose the things that they want. There are many ritual implements in the spatial sacred hall, including some that are arcane and mysterious. I will leave those for you and Emperor Xia, said Yi Futian. Oh, said Xia Qingyuan with a nod. She had not used up any of her power, as she had basically just been watching the battles. I want this one. At that moment, Yuan Hong of the Yuanyang clan pointed to one of the treasures. It was a map scroll from which radiant light was emanating. Yi Futian did not even bother looking at what it was. Get ready for it, he said. Oh! Yuan Hong stepped forward as Yi Futian directly unsealed the item, without even really looking at it. He had promised everyone that he would give them ritual implements, and he would keep his promise. They could have any items that they chose. He did not care what they were. I want this one, said Seventh Slayer of the Clan of the Seven Slayers. Yi Futian unsealed it for him. Then people were constantly choosing the ritual implements that looked powerful and were well suited to themselves and to their forces. Many seals were broken for the many people in the hall. At that moment, many people looked up into the air and saw that someone had broken through to the next level after receiving their ritual implement. It was Seventh Slayer of the Clan of the Seven Slayers. He had formed a connection with his ritual implement, which had been enough to launch him to the next level. Endless wisps of slaughtering will filled the air and swallowed up all the worldly great path in the area. He had forged a wheel of the great path. Yi Futian watched Seventh Slayer breaking through to the next level. Divine slaughtering light suffused Seventh Slayer's body. A strange look came over Yi Futian's face as he watched this. There seemed to be two kinds of wolf fighting within Seventh Slayer's body. Boom! Cracks seemed to appear in the very air. The divine arm that he had received was a spear, and it was eating up the worldly great path and pumping it into his body. A look of intense pain was on his face. What's wrong? Someone whispered. Yuan Hong's eyes shone with divine light. So it was true. If he had had the good luck to reach the Renhuang Plain here in the God's Relic, he would have been able to forge an unblemished wheel. The wheel of the great path slowly materialized. Yi Futian looked at Seventh Slayer and said, if he breaks the will that he had previously, what will happen? He will likely be crippled, answered Dou Zhao. Ah! Yi Futian said no more, but he still looked into the air. The others were all watching as well. After a while, Seventh Slayer's wheel of the great path was formed. Divine light emanated from him, and his slaughtering aura spread to every corner of the room. A celestial level wheel, said Dou Zhao. A look of confusion came over Yi Futian's face. What did you say? He asked. I am talking about his wheel of the great path, said Dou Zhao. Do you not know the different levels of wheels of the great path? I know of the different levels of Renhuangs, the 3 ranks and 9 tiers. There are different levels of wheels as well? Asked Yi Futian. There are, though only the top forces of the 9 supreme realms make this distinction. Among the common forces, things are not so clear since all of their wheels are common level, said Dou Zhao. When wheels of the great path are created, they are divided into different levels based on their strengths and weaknesses. The vast majority of Renhuangs have common level wheels. Those who are incredibly talented can forge golden wheels that shine with brilliant light. At the higher level, you have celestial level wheels. Wheels at this level are extremely strong, and few people can forge them. This is the kind of wheel that Seventh Slayer just forged. Of course, legends say that there are even wheels above this, perfect wheels that shine with dazzling divine light. These are called divine level wheels. There are those who say that the reason all wheels of the great path are called divine wheels is that they all originally start at the divine level. But when there are flaws in one's will, you get wheels of lower levels. All wheels are imperfect, And so we of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path have made these distinctions. In reality, any will below the divine level is commonplace. There should only be perfect at imperfect wheels. I understand. Yi Futian looked up at seventh slayer up in the air. His divine will was stronger than that of Wu Meng, who he had just fought. Huang Zhong, who cultivated in the ancestral lands of the divine palace, had wanted to forge a perfect divine level wheel of the Great Path. He had heard those mysterious people in the divine palace talk a little bit about this, but they had never spoken about the different levels in concrete terms. Seventh Slayer had forged his wheel here in the god's relic. The divine arm he had taken had given him this chance, and thus he had forged a celestial level divine wheel. But it was still flawed as it was not at the divine level. He had just been wondering, if Seventh Slayer attacked someone with his wheel, what would it be like? Of course he could not say this. This was Seventh Slayer's personal path of cultivation, and their friendship was not very deep yet. They could not speak of matters of life and death casually yet. Each force finally selected 3 divine arms, but they all still wanted more. They felt that 3 was not enough. They hated to leave. Can't we pick some more to take back to the people in our clans? Dozhao asked tentatively. You were only choosing for yourselves before? Yi Futian's face darkened. They were so shameless. Dozhao smiled awkwardly and said, I am the most prominent junior member of the Dou tribe after all. One day I will be the leader. Yi Futian felt that in some aspects, he was not Dou Zhao's equal. He looked at the others and saw their expectant gazes. Fine, each force way choose 2 more. Qishao Divine Mountain and Brahma's Pure Sky expended a little bit less power, so they don't get to, said Yi Futian. Qishao Divine Mountain had been hesitant, and had only decided to join them at the last moment. In addition, they had only fought the weakest of opponents, so loyalty was not assured. Right now they were in an alliance, but after they left, who knows if they would be friends or enemies. He could not trust them too much. As for Brahma's Pure Sky, Qin he looked at him with a smile then said to him telepathically, Are you really going to be so cruel to me, Lord Yi? Forgive me, Goddess Qin. You can keep the ritual implements yourself. If Brahma's Pure Sky wants them, then when the Empress asks me, I will surely give them to her, answered Yi Futian. Qin he stared at him. Did he have some ulterior motive with this? The people from Qishao Divine Mountain's expressions changed. They did not say anything, but they were clearly unhappy. But the other forces were all quite glad. They seemed to like this new turn of events. In reality, Yi Futian had originally planned to give each force 5 divine arms. Soon, the various forces had each chosen 2 more items. Yi Futian walked down the vast hall, until he finally discovered that it was blocked off. There was a gate blocking off one side of the hall. In front of the gate was a pearl shining with brilliant golden light. All the light in the hall seemed to be gathering towards it, and forming countless lines of light. Obviously, the god's relic did not end here. There must be more land beyond the gate. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. 1628 Creator of History. 1628 Creator of History, what is this? Whispered Yi Futian as he stood before the pearl. All the light in the spatial sacred hall was gathering in this one place. It was clearly a supernatural object. What kind of secrets did it contain? He looked back over his shoulder. If this hall was truly the treasure trove of some great figure, then the gate was probably the entrance to the treasure room. The pearl was the first thing in front of the gate. Could it be that it was the key to the whole spatial sacred hall? Divine light flashed in his eyes, making him able to see through anything. He saw how the pearl connected with the entire spatial sacred hall. All of the seals on the treasure seemed to be one with it. Many illusory spatial gates appeared in all directions. It seemed like they were everywhere. It seemed like if he could master this pearl, he could unlock all the gates with a single thought. He let his thoughts enter into it and saw a brilliant, dazzling light emit from the pearl. The light covered everything in the hall, making it so that it was painful for people to keep their eyes open. Be careful. As the whole hall lit up with dazzling radiance, Yaya could feel the spatial power in the room strengthening. In the instant that she said that, Yi Futian was covered in spatial light. All of the illusory gates overlapped on top of him, swallowing him up completely. A group of figures flashed over towards him, but countless gates appeared in front of them. Their expressions turned dark. "What is that thing?" said one of the people who had rushed over. This sudden change had made it so that they were unable to reach Yi Futian. They thought that he had already completely mastered the spatial sacred hall. He had never thought that this pearl that had not been sealed away would have had such hidden danger. No one could get closer to it. They were all blocked by the spatial gates. Even being a few inches away was like being oceans apart. In the same instant as Yi Futian's consciousness entered the pearl, the endless gates appeared in his vision, one after another, covering his consciousness. In that moment his thoughts seemed trapped. There were no divine arms round him, only gates. It was like he was in a huge spatial prison. His expression changed slightly. He had been a bit careless here. This pearl was perhaps the most mysterious ritual implement within the spatial sacred hall. It had not been sealed, because it itself was the seal. This pearl was the origin of all the seals. Endless spatial light flowed out. There was no sense of order to these gates, and they could not be controlled. Perhaps it was because the master of the spatial sacred hall had died. This is dangerous, thought Yi Futian. The spatial light continued to flow. If it was going to attack him, he would not be able to withstand it. Thinking of this, he began to shine with brilliant divine light. His eyes became incredibly frightening. Even his divine spirit seemed to become a real golden object. He could perceive all the deep mysteries of the world. The principles of these gates were similar to those in the outside world, but there were too many of them. When countless gates appeared in a single instant, his senses were overloaded. But if he slowed down and deeply thought about their secrets, he could unlock them one by one. When he realized this, he gradually relaxed and stabilized his mood. His divine spirit flowed out towards the gates. Open! His divine spirit descended, and a spatial gate opened, then a second one, then a third. The endless spatial gates seemed to form a tunnel that he was trapped inside. Yi Futian did not dare be even the least bit careless. He continuously opened the gates, as he continued on towards the depths of the tunnel. As time passed, the people on the outside began to look very worried, especially Yi Futian's friends. Although they had great faith in Yi Futian's abilities, this was no ordinary place. The pearl was clearly something extraordinary, and nobody knew what would happen with it. But there was nothing they could do. They could only wait. A thought appeared in everyone's minds. They stared forward. Time seemed to slow, and that moment seemed to take a very long time. In that moment, the whole spatial sacred palace lit up with brilliant light. All the spatial power in the hall flowed towards the pearl, as if it was returning to the source. What is happening? Everyone looked into the hall. The endless beams of spatial light were slowly disappearing. The pair seemed to possess infinite space as it swallowed up everything. The ritual implements are going into it too, said someone. Everyone realized that the space where the ritual implements were sealed was being sucked in as well. The pearl began to spin quickly, giving off brilliant light that lit up the whole hall. It seemed like it would never be filled. The inside of the pearl contained infinite space. Everyone found it hard to keep their eyes open, as they saw all the space in the hall being swallowed up. When the light dissipated, the spatial sacred hall had disappeared as well. The vast hall had vanished without a trace. The pearl was still spinning and giving off spatial light. Yi Futian's figure appeared in front of it. Golden light was shining from his brow, producing a mystical connection with the pearl. The light connected him to it like they were of one body. He's all right. Everyone sighed when they saw him. He had escaped the terrible seal. At that moment, Yi Futian opened his eyes, and the pearl disappeared along with the light coming from his forehead. In addition, the ritual implements and divine arms disappeared as well. A look of shock flashed in everyone's eyes. The pearl had swallowed up everything in the spatial sacred hall, as if it was the source of everything. Is something wrong? Asked Xiaqing Yuan. Yi Futian shook his head and smiled. It was a false alarm. On saying this, he rubbed his forehead, and a strange expression came over him. He had wanted to take everything in this treasure house. At the very least, he would need a few ritual implements. In that case, things would be a little difficult. First, he would need to spend a lot of time and energy, but he had never thought that it would all be resolved by a little bit of fright and shock. He had received the pearl that sealed all the ritual implements and divine arms in the spatial sacred hall. Now he had formed a connection with it, and he could use it at will. You refined it? Asked Dozhao in shock. This guy was crazy. He could do this too. He thought back to when Yi Futian had taken the spear that had fighting wool swirling around it in the underground palace. It seemed that it had been quite easy for him. Was there anything he could not do? It was difficult for others to obtain ritual implements, but Yi Futian was good at it. He could unseal them with a single thought. Now he had directly refined the source of the spatial sacred hall, obtaining all the ritual implements at once, so that he did not need to master them one by one. This, after seeing him fight the god of battle, he would just have to accept it if he felt wronged in the future. It seemed there was no reason for him to be too arrogant. I don't know, said Yi Futian with a shrug. He did not show the treasure he had gained. Dozhao looked at him. He didn't know. Yi Futian turned and walked towards Tay Gate. The divine arms had been divided up, so now they should continue heading inwards. The purple gold rats who had gone in the other three directions had reached their ruins already. Even from here he could feel that they were very close. If they were far away his perception would be very hazy, but since they were close it was extremely clear. They were in 4 different places. Yi Futian looked at the gate, and brilliant divine light shot out of his forehead. It flowed towards the gate, lighting it up. The people behind Yi Futian trembled. He had already mastered the ability to control the gates? It was possible that nobody had ever entered that place before. Could it be that something that had never happened before was going to take place here in the god's relic today? A booming sound rang out, and a crack appeared in the gate. Light poured through it. As everyone watched with trembling gaze, it opened up inwards, as if where they were standing was actually inside the gate. Yi Futian raised a hand to shield his eyes. He had found the way to break the seals, and it had worked for the gate as well. What would be inside it? Yi Futian had come from the eastern side of the god's relic. Just as he had guessed, there were ruins in the other 3 directions as well. There were many divine trees in the south upon which grew many pieces of fruit of the way, that grew thick with will. A rare kind of grass grew there as well. To the north there was a collection of books. In this collection were sacred and valuable texts that recorded many powerful and mystical arts. To the west were many statues of armored soldiers, as well as statues of divine beasts that contained powerful wool guarding them. At that moment, many people were still searching in the south and the west and fighting each other constantly. There had been many casualties. Within the book collection to the north, the battles had already ceased as the cultivators had come to the end of it. There was a huge wall covered in bookcases there that looked like a gate. There was a book in front of it, one that seemed divine. Golden light circled around it. It was very large, and the light coming from it lit up the room. At that moment, a figure was standing calmly before the book, one who was clearly someone extraordinary. He was young, and had an unforgettable look to him. His face was bright and clear, and his eyes shone with divine light. There were many people behind him, cultivators from all the 9 realms. And they were all top figures. They belonged to many different factions. But they all stood behind this young man. No one went up to disturb him. Shockingly powerful figures appeared in every generation, and this one was no exception. In fact, this man was even more dazzling than those who had come before him. He came from the Central Emperor realm. Many years ago when he was still a junior, he had already made a name for himself. Now, he had naturally been among those who came to the god's relic. Among 10,000 secrets of the way, there were none that he had not discovered. Now would he be able to unlock this divine book? The book collection had originally been sealed, but now it was open and wind blew through it, making the young man's robe swirl. The golden light upon the book glowed even brighter as ancient characters flew out of it, imprinting themselves in the young man's eyes. It was like they were flying directly into his brain. There was a sound of the bookcase moving, and everyone's hearts beat faster. They could see that the bookcase was beginning to open. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, Right. A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 16 29 Tiantian Academy. Chapter 16 29 Tiantian Academy. The divine golden gate opened. Yi Futian and the others looked inside. Was this the true end of this ruin? Yi Futian stepped right through the doorway, and the other cultivators followed behind. Destroyed palaces and ruins. Yi Futian swept his gaze around. They seemed to be in the wreckage of several palaces. People had obviously once been here. Could some high-level battles have broken out? The broken palaces all seemed to have been built out of some supernatural material. This was like a divine treasure house. It was impossible to imagine just how magnificent this place must have once been. The whole area was filled with magnificent will. Look over there. Some of the people were looking up into the distance. As the destroyed palaces continued, they could faintly see an incomparably glorious celestial palace floating in the air up ahead. It looked like a divine ruin. A ruin left behind by a god. Was this the true meaning of the god's relic? Boom! A sound rang out, making all the cultivators look towards it. Their formation was suddenly broken and thrown into confusion. Before they had come here, they had all been working together. But if this was truly the god's relic, would they really let each other have it? Probably none of them would. They would all fight for it. Yi Futian took a step forward, but he was not too concerned. He knew that this place was truly the core. The main places in each of the four directions seemed to be a treasure trove, a library, a garden, and now this in front of them. This must have been a place where an incredibly powerful figure had lived. This whole god's relic that people were fighting over was nothing more than his treasure trove. If there were something in here, it would probably be extremely difficult to steal. They flew through the air towards the ruins that were floating high above, passing through destroyed palaces and ruins. They finally reached the floating palace and looked up at it. An incredible pressure covered the cultivators, giving them a feeling of awe. It seemed that even after so many years, the palace still contained supreme majesty. A thread of invisible force appeared in front of them, blocking their path. There was an incredibly spacious road of the great path ahead of them that went all the way to the palace. They could see some statues standing guard in the distance that looked like real people, though they could tell there was no life within them. But they still stood guard below the palace. They were guarding a set of stairs that went up to the palace. It seemed that going up those stairs was the only way to get there. Imperial Majesty. Yi Futian's heart was trembling fiercely. There were hints of imperial majesty left behind at this palace. He himself had some of the will of the emperor, and so he was naturally familiar with how it felt. In that case, the master of this palace must have been someone at the same level as the great emperor. This must have been the place where he had cultivated. If that was so, did that mean when the people of the world spoke of the gods, they were really talking about great emperors? They were as strong as gods. Everyone was still trembling on the inside, but they suddenly sensed that many powerful auras were coming towards them. They suddenly turned and saw a group of figures coming through the air from behind them. It was a group of cultivators who just so happened to have come to the same place as them. What is going on? Looks of surprise came over all their faces. Those others had not been here before. How had they gotten here? Yi Futian had not told anyone about the ruins, so they did not know about them yet. Those cultivators who had just arrived looked at Yi Futian's group in shock as well. One of them even said, "How did you get here?" "I'd like to ask you the same question. Where did you come from?" Someone replied. No one knew what was going on. It seems that our elder guessed right. Traveling in each of the four directions here at the god's relic will lead you to the same place in the end, came a voice from the crowd. Everyone looked surprised at this. Each of the four directions led to the same place? A figure stepped out from the group who had just arrived, handsome and imposing. In the instant that he appeared, everyone's gaze fell upon him. So he has come. Surprise flashed in Yuan Hong of the Yuanyang clan's eyes. This man was famous throughout the Central Imperial Realm. He was the standout figure of his generation. And now he was here. He's at the Runhuang level. Yuan Hong trembled when he sensed the young man's aura, remembering that he had not been at that level yet when he had first entered the god's relic. Moreover, given his talent, he would not have been willing to hastily enter the Renhuang Plain. So he must have had an incredible opportunity to do so. He was so talented. What kind of wheel of the great path had he forged? Could it be a perfect, unblemished one? Yuan Hong looked back at Yi Futian beside him. Although he came from the Yuanyang clan of the Central Imperial Realm, Yi Futian's talent still shocked him. He had made history all by his own strength, and had brought them all to this unknown place. If the god's relic was really here, Yi Futian actually had a chance of competing for it. But now, looking at this man who had reached the Renhuang level, Yuan Hong could feel Yi Futian's hopes evaporating. It could even be said that he had no hope at all. It was no wonder that they had come here. It was because that man was with them, and he had reached the Renhuang level. Yi Futian looked at the young man as well. So someone had guessed correctly. Moreover, the man who was speaking gave him the feeling that he was incredibly powerful. Do you know him? Yi Futian asked Yuan Hong. He could feel that Yuan Hong was comparing him to that man. Have you heard of the most prestigious academy in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path? Asked Yuan Hong. Yi Futian shook his head. No. Yuan Hong looked at him. This guy really didn't care about anything. Tianshan Academy in the Central Emperor Realm is known as the foremost place in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path for seeking the path. It contains countless ancient texts, and countless people go there to study. However, even though they are all great talents, none of them are able to enter the core of Tianshan Academy. But this man is considered the greatest member of the younger generation there. Before him, all the heroes of the Central Imperial Realm pale in comparison. Yuan Hong whispered to Yi Futian. Even including me. Yi Futian was surprised. Yuan Hong, who had been born into the Yuanyang clan, was a very proud and confident man. But he had said that he was no match for this man. This showed just how talented he was. He was truly an overwhelming figure. He was the foremost young man at Tianshan Academy. He was someone who could crush all foes. Moreover, he was from the Central Emperor Realm. No wonder he had felt that he was special as soon as he had seen him. Is he Jian Qingzhu of Tianshan Academy? Asked Dou Zhao from beside them. Yes, that is the greatest talent of Tianshan Academy, Jian Qingzhu, said Yuan Hong with a nod. A look of surprise came over his face. He turned to Dou Zhao and asked, You know of him too? Dou Zhao was from the Ziwei realm. If it was some great figure, it would be natural for Dou Zhao to know him. But Jian Qingzhu was of the same generation as Dou Zhao. But even given the vast distance between their realms, he still knew of him. This was very out of the ordinary. My elder said that once I inherit the leadership of the Dou tribe, I will stand among the greatest figures of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Jian Qingzhu will be another one of them, said Dou Zhao. This man was born into the Jian clan, the founders of Tianshan Academy. When he was young, he read through all the books there, and learned all the different methods therein. There is nothing he cannot do. So powerful, said Yi Futian. He was a man whose name shook the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, and made the other proud sons of heaven of the same generation, as him say, they were not as good as him. This was a man whose talent could shock the world. Previously, he had met Huang Zhong at the ancestral land of the Divine Palace, whom no one could compare to. Now here was Jian Qingzhu, who played a similar role in Tianshan Academy. Moreover, the fact that he had made it here meant that he had uncovered the secrets of the god's relic. The people who had gone in the other two directions had not made it here yet, and they would not necessarily ever do so. At that moment, Jian Qingzhu's gaze fell upon Yi Futian. Did you come from the east? He asked. Yes, said someone with a nod. Did you come from the north? Jian Qingzhu nodded as well, saying, If my elder guessed right, the east must have had the skeletons of many demonic beasts, and a divine hall full of ritual implements. Jian Qingzhu was of high birth. He was from the Jian clan, which had founded Tianshan Academy, and had sent expeditions to the god's relic before. Thus he knew a little bit more about this place than others. They had never shared this information with the outside world. He had decided to go to the trove of a book, as that was the area he was most skilled in. Events had proven that he had made the right choice, and he had gotten a lot of the things that he had wanted. After all, he had broken through to the next level there, and then come here. Who was it who opened the gate between the divine hall and here? He asked. Since he had come here, he knew just how hard it was to do so. He had thought he would be the first, but someone had gotten here first. Everyone's gaze fell upon Yi Futian, including Jian Qingzhu's. I am Jian Qingzhu of Tianshan Academy, he said to Yi Futian with a nod. I am Yi Futian, the heir of Sky River Temple in the Tianhe realm, answered Yi Futian. A look of surprise came over Jian Qingzhu's face at his introduction. The Tianhe realm? Could it be that he didn't come from any of the 9 supreme realms? The Sky River Temple must be the place where the Sky River Great Elder cultivated. A conflict had occurred there between him and the Shin clan. What was in the north? Asked Yi Futian curiously. A trove of books with many ancient texts, answered Jian Qingzhu as if he did not care at all. Yi Futian nodded slightly. It was just like he had sensed from the purple gold rats. What you said before must be right. No matter which direction you go in, you will always end up here in the end, he said. Everyone's gaze fell upon the white-haired youth. Could Yi Futian of the Tianhe realm do the same things as Jian Qingzhu, even open one of the gates? If what Jian Qingzhu had said was correct, that the east held a trove of ritual implements, had Yi Futian and his people taken them all? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1630 Seeking the Way in the Garden. Chapter 1630 Seeking the Way in the Garden. There was one person in the crowd who could not restrain him and began walking towards the floating palace. This was their destination in the god's relic. Moreover, Jian Qingzhu and Yi Futian had had the same idea, that the 4 directions would all go to the same place in the end. This meant that this place was the actual god's relic. Despite their extraordinary minds, they still found it hard to control themselves, and thus this one man rushed forward. An invisible imperial aura covered the sky above the palace, throwing back the figure who rushed towards it. He landed with wobbly knees. He looked up at the palace. How could mortals contend with this power that came from the gods? The area in front of the palace was completely blocked off. There was absolutely no way to get into the palace from the air. Perhaps the only way was to go up the road of the Great Path and step onto the divine stairway. Although he had been forced back, the figure could still feel the mighty power coming from the palace. There was so much pressure on him that he felt like he was being crushed by a mountain. There was a roar as the Great Path surged within him. He straightened himself out and stood up, taking a determined step forward towards the road. Boom! A low roar sounded from the road. He walked up towards the palace while everyone else watched calmly. Although many of them found it hard to restrain themselves as well, they understand when they saw this situation that it would not be easy to get to this palace. It would probably be even harder than it had been to get here. There were many statues standing guard in front of the stairway that looked like ancient divine generals. When the figure reached that place, one of the statues lit up with brilliant radiance. A burst of terrible wool swept out, making an illusory image appear. It looked like a battlefield. Bang! There was a loud noise as the figure was sent flying backward. Blood poured from his mouth as he slammed into the ground. The power of the Great Path descended upon him, making so he could not stand up. Crimson blood stained his robes. All the cultivators frowned when they saw this. It was just as they had guessed. That cultivator was from one of the top forces as well. But even he was being kept outside. Yi Futian was staring forward as well. He seemed to sense a burst of powerful will. Even though many years had passed, and they had turned into statues, they still possessed will. Moreover, there were many statues over there. It would not be easy to pass them. He was not sure he could do it. Jian Qingzhu was just like Yi Futian, the genius cultivator, who was known as the foremost young member of Tianshan Academy, did not move. He looked at the celestial palace, then pointed at it and said, "If this palace was left behind by the gods, then the entrances from the other 2 directions must be around here too. Go and see if we can open them up from the inside." Open them up? The people around him looked surprised. At a time like this, when the number of people he had to compete with was decreasing, Jian Qingzhu was going to let the cultivators from all the top powers of the 9 supreme realms come here? Yes, said Jian Qingzhu with a nod. There is only one chance to obtain the god's relic. Since people have already come here from the divine temple, there must be nothing there. I haven't been in the other 2 directions, and I'd like to go see them. He had chosen to come from the collection of books because that was what he was most skilled in, but that did not mean he didn't want to see what the other 3 directions held. All of the areas of the god's relic were extraordinary. Now that he had a chance, he naturally wanted to go and see the other ones and see if he could get anything from them. Even if he could not get as much out of them as he had at the collection of books, it was still worth going. The people from Tianshan Academy around him all looked surprised. If anyone else had the advantage of coming here first, they would not have acted like Jian Qingzhu and thought to open up the ways to the other parts of the god's relic. His way of thinking was truly different from other people's. But looking at it from a different perspective, this showed just how absolutely confident Jian Qingzhu was in himself. It seemed like no matter how many people came to the god's relic, it would still be his in the end. If he could not get it, then no one could. All right. Someone nodded and turned to leave. This person had no desire for the god's relic. This was Jian Qingzhu's ambition. Other than a few of the other disciples from top forces, no one else at Tianshan Academy could compete with him. If the gates can be opened from the inside, I will go to the garden with you in a little bit, said Yi Futian to Xia Qingyuan. The garden? A confused look came over Xia Qingyuan's face. She looked at him uncomprehendingly. Yes, the garden, said Yi Futian with a smile. For us, and even for the 9 supreme realms, this is something that a god left behind, and thus it is called the god's relic. But for him, it was just his home. Those bones of the demonic beasts and those treasures were probably the remains of beasts that he raised and rode, and some treasures that he collected. And the divine tree and celestial plants in the other direction were probably just his garden. Xia Qingyuan was speechless at Yi Futian's words. But he seemed to make some sense. For the people of the world, this was the god's relic. But to the god himself, it was just his place of cultivation. Yi Futian meant that this place was just the home of an incomparably powerful man. Why do you want to go to the garden? Asked Xia Qingyuan curiously. Is your life spirit not that of a lotus? Of course we should go to the garden to see if there are useful things for you there, said Yi Futian. There was a purple gold rat hidden there, who had not fought anyone. So no one had paid attention to it. Thus he knew more or less what was going on there. Xia Qingyuan stared at him. Was he showing that he cared for her? When he saw the way she was looking at him, Yi Futian smiled and said, Your personality isn't really that good, princess, but I won't hold it against you. The emotions that had just been born in Xia Qingyuan's heart instantly evaporated. She looked at Yi Futian coldly. That be ****. Absolutely shameless. What was wrong with her personality? At that moment, a voice came from the distance. Another powerful aura was spreading towards them, making a look of surprise come over Yi Futian's face. Was it opening? Could it really be that simple? Apparently, it was hard to get in from the outside, but easy to get out from the inside. After all, this had been someone's home. Boom! Brilliant light shot towards them as even more powerful auras spread out. Renhuang-level cultivators were arriving. Yi Futian looked up and saw a familiar figure. It was Huang Zhong, the most powerful young member of Shangxiao Divine Palace, and a Renhuang-level cultivator. When he had gone to the Divine Palace to train, Huang Zhong had only been a step away from the Renhuang Plain. He had just wanted to forge a perfect wheel of the Great Path. Now here in the God's Relic, he seemed to have found his opportunity to do so. He had successfully created the wheel of the Great Path that he had wanted. After all, he was said to be number 1 within the Divine Palace. Let's go, Yi Futian said to Xia Qingyuan. Let the others do as they will. On saying this, the 2 of them left. No one would probably be able to inherit what was left behind in the God's Relic for a while. So he wanted to see the other places here. The fruit of the way that he had gotten while training at the Divine Palace was limited, and he was using them up quickly. Yuxing did not go with him. He wanted to see what would happen here. Soon more and more people gathered. The people of all the 9 supreme realms were gathering here. At that moment, Yi Futian reached the gate on the south side. He stepped out as if everything going on behind him had nothing to do with him. When he stepped out, he saw that there was a willow tree beside him. It seemed to be extremely ordinary, except for the fact that it was very old, and thus very large. Countless branches drooped down from it, and there was a pavilion under it. At that moment, there was a monk within the pavilion, looking dignified and stately. His eyes were closed as he cultivated assiduously. He seemed to be coming to some realization there under the willow tree. "Brother," said Yi Futian to the monk. He sensed that the monk had a special aura about him, forming a force field around the area. He must be a cultivator from a top force from the mountain realm, Yi Futian thought to himself. He was the only person there under the tree. "What are you looking at, sir?" came a voice. Beside him, Xiaqing Yuan could hear it too. It was not telepathy, but the monk's mouth did not move. "There are many divine trees and celestial plants here. Why are you cultivating under this ordinary willow tree?" asked Yi Futian. "Perhaps in your eyes this willow tree is ordinary, but in my eyes, it is divine," said the monk. "When I look at the mountains, they are not mountains. When I look at the lakes, they are not lakes." He was speaking of the 3 levels of Zen. At the first level, when one looked at mountains, one saw mountains, and when one looked at lakes, they were lakes. At the second level, when one looked at mountains, they were no longer mountains, and when one looked at lakes, they were no longer lakes. At the third level, the mountains were once again mountains, and the lakes were once again lakes. "I would have thought you would have already gone past the second level, master, and reached the third. I would think that you would see mountains and lakes," said Yi Futian with a smile. "My body is a Bodhi tree. My mind is a mirror," the monk said to Yi Futian with a smile. Although he had not yet opened his eyes, Yi Futian still felt like he was looking at him. "I did not mean to interrupt you cultivation, master," said Yi Futian. He and Xiaqing Yuan began to walk away. "Why were you two talking in riddles?" asked Xiaqing Yuan, a look of confusion in her eyes. What had they been talking about? He had given up all the divine trees and celestial plants, and was cultivating under an ordinary willow tree. His mind was as clear as a mirror. Thus, he was able to see right through that tree, said Yi Futian. The willow tree was not as simple as it seemed. As he said this, a powerful aura suddenly spread out behind him. He stopped and turned around. Xiaqing Yuan looked over her shoulder as well. They saw brilliant light shining under the tree, shooting up into the clouds. They saw a huge golden Buddha form there that then transformed into a divine wheel. The willow tree became golden as well and swayed without stopping. At that moment, countless willow leaves began to swirl around in the air, as divine light poured through them, falling upon the monk. The monk's body had turned gold, and he slowly rose into the air. He had entered the way and become a Buddha. This was the Runhuang Plain. He formed a perfect wheel of the great path, whispered Yi Futian. Xiaqing Yuan looked at the incomparably bright willow tree in shock, then looked at Yi Futian beside her and asked, "What was that tree?" "I don't know. Perhaps the god who lived here used to cultivate beneath it," said Yi Futian with a smile. "Let's go and find a chance for you to become a Runhuang. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1631 Lotus in the Lake. Chapter 1631 Lotus in the Lake. Xiaqing Yuan looked at Yi Futian, only to see him with a smile on his face that seemed to be full of confidence. It was as if he already knew where to look for opportunities. She knew that Yi Futian could control the demons, and he must have dispatched the purple gold rats to all sides. It was possible that Yi Futian might already know of the movements here, and was just taking her on a trip. The two figures flickered straight to their destination. They passed many divine trees and enchanted plants, but Yi Futian just glanced at them without interest. After a while they came upon a lake. The lake was large, with pavilions next to it that looked like places to rest. In the middle of the lake, there were lotus flowers blooming like a sea of flowers. "The breath of life is strong," Xiaqing Yuan mumbled to herself. She looked toward the center of the lake. In the middle of the sea of lotuses, There was one that was blooming in 6 colors, swaying in the lake with each petal a different color. This one lotus was huge. It was as if it was the chief of all the lotus flower with its 6 petals. There were many people standing in the middle of the lake, and they were all floating on the surface of the water, as if they were weightless. All of them were stationed in different positions, and it seemed that they were all fighting for that single lotus. Clearly, they all realized that this lotus was extraordinary and was born of the way. Seeing Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan coming their way, many glanced at them, but they looked calm and unconcerned. Obviously, the two did not cause too much concern. These 2 cultivators were only of Saint Plain, and the cultivation of the woman was not even worth much consideration at all. The white-haired youth possessed unusual temperament, but they didn't know him. They had not seen him in this area before. Perhaps he was someone who had arrived later than the others. God's relic has already appeared. Don't you want to go see? Yi Futian said. Many of the figures floating on the lake turned to look at Yi Futian, and one of them said, God's relic has appeared? Yeah. Yi Futian nodded and said, Jian Qingzhu from Tianshan Academy traveled from the north, passed over the land of the book collection, and entered the true location of God's relic. The gates leading toward other major directions were ordered to open, which confirmed the fact that all 4 directions eventually led to the same destination, the heavenly palace in God's relic. Now everyone is rushing to get there, but it seems you didn't know that yet. Are you serious? A lady with extraordinary temperament asked as the faces of those in the group altered slightly. Her eyes were sharp, and she looked intently at Yi Futian. Had the real God's relic been opened? How could this be fake? Go see for yourselves and you'll know, Yi Futian said. Why don't you go? The woman looked at Yi Futian cautiously. Jian Qingzhu and many other genius talents were there. I am avoiding the spotlight for a while, Yi Futian said with a smile. Everyone looked at him, as if they understood something. This man must have known that there was no hope for him to compete, so he came here. The purpose of informing them of God's relic was probably to lure them away, so he could take the lotus flower himself. This lotus flower was extremely unusual. They felt its existence before they even arrived here, so they came to fight for it with one another. None of them were able to take it away yet. See you guys later, someone said as he went into the distance, clearly believing Yi Futian. He didn't appear to be lying. They too had felt some movements but had no idea what was happening. You are not going? Yi Futian asked. That's the inheritance of the gods. The woman who spoke before glanced at Yi Futian. It was not as simple as making them leave. Even if God's relic had really appeared, it would certainly be another bloody storm of battles, and it would take some time for the dust to settle. In light of that, this lotus became the priority. You all have been fighting for it for a long time without result, and you can't take this lotus flower with you anyway. Why waste time here? You are better off trying your luck at the heavenly palace, where you might receive the inheritance of God. Yi Futian continued to incite. When everyone heard what Yi Futian said, they looked baffled. The woman asked, You claim to come from there, so how do you know that we have been fighting for this for a long time? It was as if he had seen all that had happened here. I also know that you are the daughter belonging to the Shao family of the Central Emperor realm, Yi Futian said with a smile. In this area, the daughter from the Shao family in the Central Emperor realm was very eye-catching and was quite an attention-getter. Her name was Xiaomuyu, and her strength was powerful and aggressive. There was some confusion in Xiaomuyu's eyes, and then those eyes that were watching Yi Futian grew cold. Just exactly where was Yi Futian coming from? How did he know of her? This lotus is useful to me. You all have already fought each other for it before. Fighting aside, it is difficult for you to take the flower easily, so why not let me give it a try? Yi Futian continued. No one paid any attention to Yi Futian, totally ignoring him. Xiaomuyu, he's right. It makes no sense for us to continue like this. Why not enter the lotus world together, and whoever can take it may have it? A young man in black across from Xiaomuyu said. I agree. In another direction, someone else also spoke up, agreeing with the other. Now except for Yi Futian, there were only 3 other parties left. Aside from Xiaomuyu from the Central Emperor realm, there was also the Fate World from the Hidden Land realm. This was the force behind the young man in black who just spoke. The other force that spoke after him was Illusion Island from Myriad Realm. All of them were the most powerful principalities in the 9 realms. Just now a major force had left them. Otherwise, it would be the 4 major powers competing for this one lotus. It could be deduced that this lotus was extraordinary. Agreed. Count me in. While Yi Futian sailed toward them, he was transmitting his voice to Xiaqing Yuan at the same time. Wait for me outside. Xiaqing Yuan stood in the lake and waited quietly. Whatever Yi Futian wanted, he could surely get his hands on. She felt a warmth in her heart. Would this be the first time Yi Futian gave her a gift? There is nothing for you. The eyes of the man in black from the fate world swept toward Yi Futian. Those eyes seemed to contain a will of fate that could swallow up the will of men. Yi Futian's eyes directed toward the man, and instantly felt torrents of wills of the way invading him. With a vibrant will of life enveloping his body, Yi Futian was still moving forward. Laughing, he said, "Since it's a fair competition, you should count me in." A lotus bloomed underneath the feet of the cultivator in black with each step he took. But it was a dark lotus. The lotus was black like ink, emitting a gloomy feeling. The black lotus flew toward Yi Futian and enlarged, turning into a giant black lotus that wanted to devour Yi Futian. The black petals extended out to cover the sky and the sun, seemingly intent on swallowing Yi Futian whole. A terrible air of death puffed out from it and meandered toward Yi Futian. Buzz! Yi Futian was submerged in a sea of black lotuses. As Yi Futian raised his finger to point, a horrific sword will fell on the petals. With a loud boom, the black lotus collapsed and shattered. The air of death screamed in the sky, turning the surrounding space pitch black. The items in God's relic are free to all to take. I arrived late, but I only asked for the opportunity to compete. If you still want to continue, you will have to speak with your strength from now on, Yi Futian said with nonchalance. No matter what happened, he would get what he came for. Since he had promised it to Xiaqing Yuan, he had to get the lotus. He didn't want to resort to outright robbery, because he didn't want to appear too ruthless. Otherwise, there would be no competition from the others. The man in black frowned. Was he being threatened? Although that sword was incredibly powerful, how dare he act so haughty? He took several steps upon the lake, and then the man in black from the fate world stepped into the air above the lake. With a turning of his mind, countless dark lotuses instantly appeared on the lake as the air of death filled the space. Yi Futian looked up at the sky that was filled with black lotuses, a spear appearing in his hand with intentions of war shooting out from it. He asked, "Why are you like this?" As he took a step, his body traversed the void and aimed towards the young man. Humph! The man in black made a cold snorting sound, and his dark eyes looked into Yi Futian's eyes. At this moment, countless black lotuses transformed into their own world that buried Yi Futian within. Countless black lotuses opened and closed around him, blocking off the void. The death currents flowed madly toward Yi Futian. The petals of the black lotus flew out, turning into the light of darkness and slashing at Yi Futian. Space locking? Yi Futian kept moving, letting the death currents flow over his body. The spear in his hand lanced at the sea of black lotuses that was drowning him. In an instant, the void seemed to have collapsed, accompanied by a loud bang. The black lotuses in front were shattered as his body turned into a stream of light, continuing to move forward. When he saw this, the man in black frowned. Countless dark lotus flowers hovered around him, opening at the same time, and turning into a black hole that engulfed Yi Futian as he came attacking. The dark air of death that filled the sky cut through the void at the limit of its speed, just like a death storm that intended to obliterate Yi Futian here and now. Bang! There was another loud noise, and without any delay, the white-haired youth rushed out of the collapsed black lotus, carrying with him the spear that exuded horrific intentions of war. A giant black lotus protected the man in black, so that the spear blasted on the lotus instead. With a loud noise, the body of the man in black was knocked out with the divine implement. Boom! Menacing breaths came out as the will of death overwhelmed the sky. Many cultivators from the fate took a step forward at the same time. Instantly, the sky turned to twilight, as if becoming a world of death. Yi Futian took one look at the cultivators from the Fate realm, stepping into the air. Get out of here. As the voice came down, there was a tremendous amount of martial will in him. At the moment when the spear was released, countless shadows also appeared at the same time. A mighty will enveloped the entire lake, as if the god of war himself had descended. Boom! An extremely violent explosion was heard. Many men flew backward, and even some cultivators from Fate World were penetrated by the shadow of the spear. There's nothing more for you guys to do here. Anyone who doesn't accept that will die, Yi Futian said coldly, denying the Fate World further participation. He had promised Xia Qingyuan the opportunity, and he would deliver it to her. He could not allow anyone to interfere. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1632 The Lotus Chooses Its Master. Chapter 1632 The Lotus Chooses Its Master. The cultivators of Fate World had extremely hard expressions on their faces. One strike of the spear directed at them was enough to repel all the cultivators and send them running. And now they were forbidden to compete, or they would be killed. Who are you? The man in black released a dark light from his eyes and asked Yi Futian. His eyes were fixed on him. They had never heard of this man, so why was he so strong? The cultivators from the Shao clan and the Illusion Island looked shocked. They did not expect Yi Futian to be so strong. If the cultivators from the Fate World couldn't sustain that single strike, would they fare any better if the strike was aimed against them instead? Yi Futian from Tianhe realm. Yi Futian replied. He looked at those from the Shao clan and the Illusion Island and said, Now can I participate in the competition? Fine. Xiaomuyu agreed. Yi Futian had such strength. Was it possible to keep him from participating? The leader of the Illusion Island also nodded without saying anything more. Now they could only rely on luck. Clearly this man was stronger than them. Yi Futian smiled and said, Isn't it great that we can reason together? There was no need to resort to violence. He had always used reason to convince the others. But if they couldn't be convinced, what the third senior brother had said held true even today. The cultivators from the Shao clan and Illusion Island twitched when they heard him. Reason? Was there any room for reasoning in the matter of competing for treasures? They thought that it only mattered who was the strongest. My friend will follow me. Yi Futian looked at Xia Qingyuan, who was behind him. He was uneasy about leaving Xia Qingyuan out here by herself, so he wanted to take her with him. Sure. No one from the two major principalities disagreed. Thanks a lot. Yi Futian was very satisfied with their response. As disciples of the top principalities, they knew how to be reasonable. Let's go. The four of them moved forward together, and the people from Fate World did not act rashly again. Yi Futian still had the spear in his hand when he was walking, and looked at them from time to time with a friendly smile on his face. However, no one had forgotten about the impressive strike that just took place. The four of them walked to the middle of the lake. The lotus bloomed with all 6 petals and opened up, its brilliance enveloping the surrounding heaven and earth. Yi Futian's eyes suddenly brightened. At a glance, he could feel that the lotus appeared to possess self-will. All things in the world were filled with spirit and contained life, and it was the same with the lotus. Containing life was not equivalent to possessing self-will. But this blooming lotus gave Yi Futian a feeling that it did. Divine light in 6 colors suddenly bloomed and enveloped the vast space. Countless lotus flowers seemed to appear around Yi Futian and the others, wrapping them inside. In just a moment, Yi Futian seemed to have entered a world of lotuses that isolated them from the outside world. Amazing, Xia Qingyuan whispered. Beneath their feet, lotus flowers also appeared. Huh? Xiaomi frowned. This was a slightly different situation from what she had encountered before. In a flash, she was heading toward the sky below, racing to the center of the lotus. However, just as she was about to touch the core, she saw gleams of radiance, and the lotus flower disappeared right in front of her. It was as if it had turned into an infinite number of lotuses floating between heaven and earth. It's gone. Xiaomi looked surprised. They had come out from the previous space, and countless lotus flowers floated on the lake, appearing just like ordinary lotus flowers. Illusion indeed. The eyes of a cultivator from Illusion Island became terrifying and looked at the lotus below. However, each lotus flower was almost the same, except for a few that were brighter than the others. His figure flashed as he waved his palms. The strength of the palm strike shattered the lotuses as he tried to eliminate the others from the true lotus. However, those lotus flowers regenerated again and again, floating silently on the lake's surface, as if they would never disappear. Xiaomuyu waved her sleeves, wanting to draw the lotus into her sleeves. However, whenever a lotus disappeared, there would be more that appeared underneath without end, forcing her to stop immediately. Xia Qingyuan looked at Yi Futian, because she did not understand what was going on. It is reluctant to leave here, and wants us to leave on our own, Yi Futian said. Reluctant to leave? Xia Qingyuan said. Do you mean that the lotus has its own will? Yi Futian shook his head. He didn't really know either. It was said that a monk comprehended the way under the willow tree, and he became a Buddha through a matter of a thought before entering the Renhuang realm. That willow tree gave him an extraordinary sensation, as it seemed to contain life. And could life give spirit to all things? What kind of realm was this? Perhaps the gods like to meditate in the lake and nurture the spirit of the lotus. Yi Futian said. The illusion magic was so strong that he couldn't discern which lotus was the real one. His eyes were able to detect all kinds of unreality, but it couldn't detect the real lotus itself. What could this mean? It meant that the lotus contained the same level of inheritance as his eyes. It was born out of the nurturing of the great emperor, and clearly, it had already obtained the way. There were many ancient trees and divine plants in the relic garden, and many of them clearly held opportunities that caused many to compete. Although this lotus was extraordinary, only a few forces came here, because of their similar abilities in cultivation. But they did not really understand. As for the willow tree, only the monk was comprehending under it. Perhaps many people knew that the willow tree was extraordinary, but they could not really comprehend anything from it. Everyone had their own opportunities. It seemed that Xia Qingyuan's chances were better than he imagined. Yi Futian walked on the surface of the lake, passing many lotus flowers. He looked at those lotuses and said, "All these flowers here are just one, aren't they? There is no difference between you and the others." He sat on the lake and put a lotus in his palm. This was why he might not see a distinction in any area. It was because they were all the same. It's just that the person you have been waiting for will probably never come back. Instead of enduring thousands of years of loneliness, it's better to find someone new, Yi Futian said to the lotus. People from the Xiao clan and other cultivators watched on with great curiosity. This guy was actually talking to the lotus. They all came from top principalities and knew that all creatures possessed spirits. But they had never seen this type of situation. Could it be true that this lotus flower really contained life? Then that would mean that it had already obtained the way. Qingyuan, sit down. Yi Futian looked up at the Xia Qingyuan, who was beside him. Xia Qingyuan sat obediently next to him. Release your life spirit, Yi Futian said. Xia Qingyuan nodded, and her life spirit was released. A radiant lotus appeared. Its petals opened and closed. At this moment, Xia Qingyuan was like a fairy with a ray of sacred glory upon her. She is like you. Her life spirit is also a lotus. Lotuses are a part of life, and you could grow and accompany her cultivation of the way of life. If you merge into her life spirit and become a part of her, there will be someone growing with you so that you won't feel lonely anymore, Yi Futian murmured softly. The breath from his body was gentle, and a bright divine light flowed in the palm of his hand. Everyone around looked at Yi Futian with a strange look. Xiaomuyu's eyes were full of curiosity. This was the first time she had seen someone grab treasure like this. Was he in a dialogue with the lotus? And asking it to select its own master? They had never seen anything like it. If it was in another circumstance, she would think that there was something wrong with Yi Futian. However, this man was extraordinarily handsome. His white garment matched his white hair, gentle and elegant. Somehow, his dialogue with the lotus gave her a very mysterious feeling, as if he was a guru of some sort. Crazy. Xiaomuyu thought to herself that this man's age should be close to hers, yet he exuded an air that was not of this world. Moreover, he was not fighting for the lotus for himself, but for the woman next to him. Was she the one he loved? The light from Yi Futian's palm had a trace of wondrous breath. The lotus flower gradually released rays of light, slowly floating upward, and actually drifting toward the life spirit of Xia Qingyuan. What is this? Everyone was shocked when they witnessed what was before them. Everything they saw now was incredible, but it was really happening in front of them. Did this work too? If they had known, they would have talked with the lotus already, without waiting for Yi Futian. The light was getting brighter and brighter, and countless lotus flowers were now integrated into the lotus flower that floated above Xia Qingyuan's head. The six-petal flower released a radiant divine light. Indeed, all the lotus flowers were one. It truly understood. At this moment, everyone was getting antsy. However, at this time, Yi Futian got up, pointing the spear in his hand in the air, and said with a laugh, "I always believe in reason. Please respect the lotus's choice." Respect a lotus's choice? When everyone heard what Yi Futian said, they felt an urge to beat him up. However, they also felt the fighting intention of the spear, and no one dared to act rashly. "You are not here to fight for yourself. Who is this?" Xiao Muyu asked, eyes on Xia Qingyuan. "My friend, but what's the difference?" Yi Futian smiled. "Why not give me the lotus? Xiao Muyu of the Xiao clan could also be your friend." Xiao Muyu smiled provocatively and unleashed her charm. She was already a very beautiful woman with elegant temperament, and at the moment, she was working with all she had. She possessed extremely lethal skills of seduction. Yi Futian was tempted for a moment, but then smiled at Xiao Muyu. Yi Futian was not someone who could be swayed by beauty. "I'll consider it if the Xiao clan wants to propose marriage to me," Yi Futian said with a smile. Did it mean that he would no longer need to cultivate with such effort if he married the daughter from the top force of Emperor Realm? Shameless. Next to him, Xia Qingyuan was feeling warm and fuzzy, but when she heard Yi Futian's words, she couldn't help but swear in a low voice. What a shameless be ****. In the future, if she could ever be moved by him again, she would. Xiao Muyu also froze and stared at Yi Futian. She must have been blind not to see that he was a shameless be ****. "I'm just kidding. Do you really think I'm that kind of person? This lotus and my friend fit together perfectly, and it took the initiative to choose its master. Naturally, it belongs to her. Whoever disagrees will have to go through me and my spear," Yi Futian said, standing guard next to Xia Qingyuan. Xia Qingyuan was again warmed in her heart. It seemed that maybe he was not so shameless after all. No one dared to move lightly. They watched the lotus flower merged into the Xia Qingyuan's life spirit. In a flash, Xia Qingyuan's life spirit released an extremely radiant glory as lotuses filled the sky. The way of heaven and earth poured into Xia Qingyuan's body madly, as she closed her eyes to meditate, absorbing the way of heaven and earth, and perceiving the true meaning of the lotus. The divine light shrouded her body. As Yi Futian glanced at her, he saw that Xia Qingyuan's face was also illuminated by divine light, just like a glorious goddess. Although she was rather fierce, if she put on something feminine, she should be pretty enough. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1633 Princess of Emperor Xia's Realm. Chapter 1633 Princess of Emperor Xia's Realm. Xiao Muyu looked at Xia Qingyuan, who was sitting on the lake, and there was a faint sense of envy in her heart. The great path was born of the lotus and nourishing the life spirit. This woman's talent seemed unremarkable and lacked outstanding cultivation. But with such an opportunity, she was destined to go through a remarkable transformation. In hindsight, she could see that although she had paid a lot of attention to this lotus before, her assessment of it was still off. This lotus had already contained spiritual wisdom, and was thus able to understand Yi Futian's persuasion. It may have been nurtured by the spirits of the gods, or the master of the relic. Such an opportunity was taken by another when it was so close at hand. All this was because of that white-haired young man, Yi Futian from Tianhe realm. This be ****. How dare he claim that he had won by reason? This was clearly a robbery. It was just that he had given such a precious gift to the woman next to him. Judging from his flirty words before, it did not seem like they were path companions. Otherwise, he would not dare to be so bold as to joke about entering the Xiao clan as a son-in-law. She was considering whether she should still try to snatch the flower. If she did, could the people of Xiao clan deal with Yi Futian's spear? I know I am extraordinarily handsome, but you don't have to stare at me like that, Yi Futian said just as Xiaomuyu was thinking. The god's relic has already opened, and there are still many other opportunities. Do you really plan on spending more time here? Xiaomuyu looked at Yi Futian and couldn't fathom. How could someone at the peak of St. Plain so accomplished in combat could be so brazenly shameless? Extraordinarily handsome? Xiaomuyu took a closer look at Yi Futian. Well, he wasn't really lying. Farewell, Xiaomuyu said as she turned to leave. After all, she had decided to give it up. It was a gamble to start a war with Yi Futian, and the odds were not good. It was far better to go somewhere else to seek other opportunities. After sending off the Xiao clan, he looked at others again with a smile. Soon, the people from Illusion Island and Fate World started to leave one after another, until only Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan were left. All of a sudden, it seemed extremely quiet. Some peace finally, Yi Futian whispered. He glanced at Xia Qingyuan beside him, who was still bathed in the sacred lotus light screen. Yi Futian smiled and said, Princess, look how much I have sacrificed for you. Xia Qingyuan gave Yi Futian a sideways glance. She suddenly smiled and said, How do you want me to reward you? Yi Futian gasped when he saw Xia Qingyuan smile, and said rather carefully, Cultivate with peace of mind, knowing that I am here standing guard for you, princess. As he was speaking, he turned to sneak aside. This woman actually knew how to smile. Horror. However, it was a truly beautiful smile. Chicken. A contemptuous voice was heard from behind him. Yi Futian had a look of slight outrage and wanted to say something tough, but he thought better of it and said nothing. There was a faint sense of loss in Xia Qingyuan's eyes when she saw how Yi Futian had behaved, but then she closed her eyes and cultivated in peace. The lotus opened up all its 6 petals and extended toward the sky. Countless rays of the great path fell down into the lotus itself. Yi Futian looked over at her. A life spirit was the foundation of cultivation. The divine lotus of the emperor was now integrated into Xia Qingyuan's life spirit, and that was enough for Xia Qingyuan to complete a transformation. Occasionally, someone was attracted to the lake by the movement, but when they saw Yi Futian standing guard with the spear on the lake, those who came would leave quickly. Anyone who had received the opportunity by themselves and remained standing would not be someone to be trifled with. They were not so blind after all. There are things that would cost them their lives if they insisted on fighting for them. Many had already fallen in this place before. Time passed slowly, but Yi Futian was in no hurry. After a while, a breath came from within the petals, which attracted Yi Futian's attention. He smiled, realizing that she had broken through the realm. With such a rare opportunity of the great path, the breakthrough was not surprising. Moreover, that breath was still getting stronger. For Xia Qingyuan, it was a total transformation inside and out, to improve the body of the great path and cleanse the spiritual soul. The glorious brilliance shone between the heavens and the earth in 6 colors, intertwined and dreamlike. After some time, this light returned, flowing toward the lotus before it disappeared. The lotus petals also disappeared along with it, transforming into a sacred lotus and entering the life palace of Xia Qingyuan. At this moment, Xia Qingyuan seemed to have undergone a metamorphosis. Even her temperament had changed, and she was radiant. Yi Futian's eyes fell on her, looking at her eyes and face. Xia Qingyuan seemed to sense the surprise in his eyes, and she slightly lowered her head and asked, What are you looking at? Nothing. Yi Futian came to his senses. This woman seemed to have gotten even more beautiful. However, he shouldn't say anything. Why don't you continue to cultivate for a while? The lotus contains the way, enough for you to comprehend for a long time, Yi Futian asked. It was not possible for Xia Qingyuan to digest it so quickly. It has already integrated into my life spirit, and is one with me now. Why should I rush? The relic is open. I don't have time to cultivate here, Xia Qingyuan responded. It was one thing if she was here cultivating alone, but for Yi Futian to stand guard here would delay his chance to fight for the relic. In her view, the relic left by the gods of the heavenly palace should belong to him. Huh? Yi Futian looked at Xia Qingyuan with surprise. What are you doing? Xia Qingyuan felt that Yi Futian was acting quite strange today. Since when is the princess so understanding? Yi Futian murmured. Xia Qingyuan glared at him with her mouth pursed. When was she not understanding? Let's go look elsewhere, Yi Futian said, and then turned to leave with Xia Qingyuan trailing behind him. Her light footsteps caused gentle ripples upon the lake. Yi Futian's divine will was permeating toward the far distance, with the purple gold rats exploring the way underground. The top characters in this region had all been informed one way or another, and converged on the real god's relic. After all, that was the center of focus. Who wouldn't want to fight for the relic left by the gods? As for this side, there were still many lesser cultivators competing for the opportunity, who were not so high among the top forces. They understood that the relic left by the gods was out of their reach, so the main thing was for them to find more opportunities that suited them. At least they had to make the trip worthwhile. At this moment, in front of a golden divine tree, there were many cultivators gathered. The golden leaves made rustling sounds, and every leaf was of a golden color that revealed a sharp sensation. The tree also bore golden fruits of the way, and all of them were precious. The people around them looked at Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan alarmingly. Yi Futian said, "You have fought enough for this tree. Our princess is somewhat interested in it. Could you give the rest of them to our princess?" Xia Qingyuan blinked her beautiful eyes, but still remained calm. Her eyes focused forward, understanding that she couldn't say anything to explain herself. Everyone stole a sideways glance at Xia Qingyuan. Xia Qingyuan, who had just gone through a metamorphosis, was dazzling. Someone asked with alarm, "What princess is this and from where? Was she from the divine kingdoms or the ancient tribes? It's rather far away. Perhaps you have never heard of it before," said Yi Futian. "Which realm of the 9 realms?" someone asked. Most of the people here came from the supreme 9 realms. None of the 9 realms. Princess of Emperor Xia's realm in the Crimson Dragon's region under the 9 realms. Yi Futian actually sounded proud and arrogant. Below the 9 realms Crimson Dragon region? Emperor Xia's realm? What small unknown, crappy realm was this in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path? Everyone's face changed drastically as they felt the humiliation. "Get out!" someone scolded in anger. They were not fit to proclaim the title of princess before them. "I have always convinced people with reason, and was willing to discuss the matter with all of you. I didn't expect you to be so disrespectful to our princess. In that case, I have to take action." Yi Futian took out the spear, and everyone sneered. However, in the next moment, a powerful intent of battle swept across the sky, and many became greatly alerted. Buzz! A shadow sailed across, with illusions of the spear filling the sky. In a short moment, everyone was lying flat on their backs. Yi Futian, being greatly satisfied, stepped over to pick all the fruits of the way. Soon the golden tree lay bare except for the trunk. "Princess, these people have been punished for disrespecting you. Let's go look elsewhere," Yi Futian said to Xia Qingyuan. Xia Qingyuan's face darkened with gloom. Even in victory, she felt greatly embarrassed. Whether robbing or plundering, there was no need to be so blatant and shameless. After Yi Futian left, all the geniuses from the top forces were so mad that they were shaking. They had never seen such a brazen cat in their lives. Whoever heard of such justification for blatant plundering? This crappy Emperor Xia's realm from Crimson Dragon region must have been some kind of scum of the lowest kind from the 9 realms. Looking at the tree that now stood bare, they just wanted to cry. "This is the princess of Emperor Xia's realm. Could you all please give away some opportunities from here?" A voice could be heard vaguely in the distance that made the eyelids of all the cultivators present twitch uncontrollably, as they mourned in silence for those in the distance. After a while, 2 figures were seen emerging from the relic, and moved toward the way back to the heavenly palace. These 2 were Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan. At the moment, Yi Futian felt as if the spring breeze was caressing his face, and he was happy. This trip was full of rewards. Next time, can you not use my name? Xiaqing Yuan said through gritted teeth. She felt completely humiliated. The princess from Emperor Xia's realm was going to be famous. I will remember what princess has said, Yi Futian said with a smile. Xiaqing Yuan knew what she had said was in vain. You've already emptied out a temple, why bother with these fruits? All the divine implements in that temple were perhaps more than the power of all the top forces within a single realm. This meant that the wealth possessed by Yi Futian alone was comparable to that of a single realm. The poor have no ambition, Yi Futian said. That was before, Xiaqing Yuan said with loathing. He wasn't poor now. Princess has never been poor, so you wouldn't understand, Yi Futian said, and Xiaqing Yuan had no response. In the past, she was a princess of one realm, but that was nothing in the situation they were currently in. Cultivation is not an easy task, Yi Futian said while taking out a fruit of the way and tossing it into his mouth, making a clear, crisp sound. He was eating it like any ordinary fruit. Xiaqing Yuan's eyelids quivered as her innards trembled. Indeed, like some poor bee *starred, he was treating the fruit of the way like any common fruit. Does princess want one? Yi Futian handed one to Xiaqing Yuan. I'm not eating it. Xiaqing Yuan firmly refused to be the same kind of ignorant fool as him. The whey contained in this fruit can cast the body to the great path faster, Yi Futian said. Xiaqing Yuan ignored him and stretched out her hand silently instead. She put the fruit to her mouth and took a gentle bite, feeling the whey enter her body with an enjoyable and refreshing feeling. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1634 Convergence of Cultivators in 9 Realms. Chapter 1634 Convergence of Cultivators in 9 Realms beneath the Heavenly Palace. Cultivators gathered in droves from every direction. All the notable figures of the 9 realms were assembled in one place. The God's Relic was definitely a place attended completely by the talented geniuses of the current 9 realms. All the best from the Saint Plane would make an appearance here. At this point, there were already many cultivators who had attempted to break into the divine path, to set foot on the stairway to the Heavenly Palace. But so far, no one had succeeded, and that immortal celestial palace that stood above the sky seemed unreachable. When Yi Futian and Xiaqing Yuan came back here again, there were already many more people present than before. Previously there was only the group that was led by him, and the group led by Jian Qingzhu, with the additional passages gained by 2 other channels in addition to those who arrived later. Quite a gathering had formed in this place. The arrival of Yi Futian and Xiaqing Yuan did not attract too much attention, and they were only noticed by some who knew him. For example, many in the upper heavens realm knew Yi Futian, and many cultivators from Divine Palace, Divine Swordly family, and Sky-Burying God clan had seen him before. That was in addition to his own notoriety. Of course, there was also the Golden Divine Nation. There was a sharpness in Gai Shirshir's eyes as a golden divine light shot out from his eyes, directed at Yi Futian. The humiliation of the past battle was still difficult for him to swallow. That was the greatest humiliation yet in his life. Huang Zhong from the Divine Palace, who had already entered the Runhuang realm at this moment, also took a look at Yi Futian. He could have broken through to the realm earlier, but he had waited until he entered God's Relic. His presence was very different from what he was before. Of course, those who were defeated by Yi Futian in the past also took notice of him, such as the Martial God clan, Heavenly Sword Hall, Ziwei Palace, and other forces that were previously expelled. They were all back now. Yi Futian had forbidden them from participating in the battle for the divine implement at the Sacred Hall, but he had emptied out the entire spatial Sacred Hall and opened that door. So they were here too, but their eyes were cautious as they regarded Yi Futian with vigilance. And Xiaomuyu and the others gave Yi Futian a dirty look. What are you looking at? At this time, there was a place among the crowd that attracted attention. The people gathered there possessed extremely superior temperament, and one of them asked the youth next to him, his disciple, The young man's eyes turned to Yi Futian, his look extremely sharp. Him? Asked the person next to him with some doubt. The one from Tianhe realm, the young man responded. It turned out that this man was a disciple of the Shun clan. Not long ago, he went to Tianhe realm with his father, Shen Yao, to make their demand of the Sky River Great Elder. He had met Yi Futian then, so he recognized him. Sky River Great Elder. The cultivators from Shun clan immediately understood when they heard the youth. Suddenly their eyes turned, and they regarded Yi Futian from afar. The people from the Shun clan evoked a sense of fear, as no other forces dared to get too close to them as they stood there. Everyone maintained a certain distance from them, so it was particularly conspicuous. Yi Futian noticed the cultivators from the Shun clan in an instant. He felt the gaze from the others. Likewise, his eyes were looking over as the two sides stared at each other. Disciples of Shun clan. Yi Futian recognized them instantly, and made a note to himself. The Shun clan had once gone to Tianhe Mountain, intending to take him away before taking his teacher Qi Xiangang to the Shun clan at Central Emperor Realm. How could he have forgotten that? Who are they? Xia Qingyuan seemed to sense something. She asked Yi Futian via voice transmission. These men did not look friendly, and they seemed to scrutinize Yi Futian very closely, which made her feel a little uneasy. Could they be forces that Yi Futian had offended? She had been transported to other realms before, so she did not know what had happened to Yi Futian. At the Central Emperor Realm in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, I've had some exchanges with the Shun clan, Yi Futian responded, and Xia Qingyuan frowned slightly. The top power of the Central Emperor Realm was enough to cause her concern. She believed that Yi Futian had no need to fear anyone in the competition at the God's Relic, because his own talent would not be inferior to those from the top powers. However, if there were grudges, then it was not a matter simply limited to the younger generation. Yi Futian's talents, no matter how impressive, couldn't contend with the top forces of the Central Emperor Realm. Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan returned to Yusheng and the others. Many powerful cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Realm were in this position. Next to them were the mighty cultivators from Dou tribe and Yuanyang clan. Yuan Hong from Yuanyang clan glanced at the direction of the Shun clan. Yi Futian claimed to be the successor of the Sky River Temple, so he must have known that there would be grievances with the Shun clan. Now, it seemed that he had already understood the implications. He was a formidable figure once upon a time, but in his old age, his obsessiveness caused self-destruction. After so many years, to have accepted an inheritor, it must be because he has high hopes in this successor. In the direction of the Shun clan, their leader spoke softly, without the disguise of voice transmission. Although they were separated by quite a bit of distance, Yi Futian could hear it clearly. When the other spoke, their eyes were still focused on him. I heard that he had personally escorted this inheritor to the City of the Ruins, the man beside him added. At its peak, there were 3,000 disciples in Sky River Temple. What is the point of accepting another disciple now, other than just to inherit his craft, and give him some comfort in his later years? The young man continued. If he had known what would happen today, why bother destroying everything back then? When he finished speaking, the youth withdrew his attention, and no longer focused on Yi Futian. They did scrutinize Yi Futian, but now that Qi Xiangang had been taken down by the family, he wouldn't deliberately pick on Yi Futian. That would be beneath him. Sky River Great Elder and the Shun clan went way back in origin. They would let him keep this one inheritor that would eventually inherit all of his craft. Yuan Hong also heard what the other had said, and his eyes drifted toward Yi Futian. Even though he had witnessed Yi Futian's talent, there was indeed a huge gap between the two of them in terms of status. Yi Futian would probably be subjected to great pressure in the future. Moreover, he knew that the young man who had spoken was the strongest of the current descendants of the Shun clan. It was one of the most dazzling figures among his peers in the Central Emperor Realm, Shenhao. Shenhao was destined to be extraordinary. His father was a fabulous cultivator in the Shun clan, and since birth, he was destined to embark on a glorious path. He did not disappoint. Since the beginning of his cultivation amongst the children of countless clansmen, he was always invincible. In the future, he would undoubtedly inherit his father's crafts. Moreover, there was a good chance that he would become the future helmsman of the Shun clan. Previously, in his fight for the spatial sacred hall, Yi Futian had offended many top principalities. But as his alliance was powerful, there was not much issue. However, now in the fight for the relic left by the gods of Heavenly Palace, status and background were all within consideration. The question was, could he do it? Therefore, no matter how powerful was Yi Futian's talent, the pressure he would be subjected to would be unimaginable. Princess had a breakthrough? Yaya noticed the transformation of Xia Qingyuan's temperament as her breath became even more overpowering. It seemed that Yi Futian had found an opportunity for her. Xia Qingyuan nodded slightly and glanced at Yi Futian beside her. I haven't found anything suitable for you yet, Yi Futian said to Yaya. I know. Yaya didn't say anything more, as she didn't have any other thought. Previously in Sword City, Yi Futian had let her choose. It was she who first gave the opportunity to the sword master of Lihan. She understood that as long as there was an opportunity, Yi Futian would never treat his people poorly. Boss, what about me? The little condor looked at Yi Futian pitifully. Even that vicious woman had broken through. Would that spell future misery for Lord Condor? What are you fretting about? Xia Qingyuan looked at the little condor with a smile. Seeing the look in Xia Qingyuan's eyes, the little condor felt goosebumps all over and muttered, "Oh boy, she wants to be the mistress." Without further ado, Yi Futian pressed his head down fiercely as Xia Qingyuan was heard saying, "After you go out, leave the little condor to me for a few days. I will share some opportunity with him." Ah! The little condor looked at Yi Futian tremblingly. Seriously, Yi Futian was speechless for the time being. Xia Qingyuan and little condor were entangled for good. How is the situation here? Yi Futian asked Yu Sheng. Everyone has arrived, but no one can approach the sky stairwell. Yu Sheng kept his eyes forward and said, "The statues seem to be alive. It is as if they still contain the will of their previous lives. There were even mirages when one stepped inside that appeared real enough." Yi Futian nodded. This was well within expectation. After all, this was the cultivation place of the fabled great emperor, which would not be so simple to breach. This had happened several times with God's relic. For more than 300 years, each time it was opened, the genius from all 9 realms would enter. But so far, no one had ever entered. This time, it was because of him and Jian Qingzhu that they were able to open 2 of the doors and activate the other 2 passages. Hence the situation at hand. Jian Qingzhu left. Yi Futian looked to the other side and didn't see Jian Qingzhu in the direction of Tianshan Academy. He said that he was going to see 2 other places, Yaya said, and Yi Futian nodded in acknowledgement. Jian Qingzhu had similar thoughts, but he only went to the Garden of Gods. As for the remaining place, it resembled more of an entrance. Many relics had already been trespassed upon and were not worth visiting. At this time, the sound of air breaking was heard, and the group of captivating characters from Tianshan Academy came forward. The person in the lead was none other than Jian Qingzhu. Eyes fell upon him, and they were very serious. Before, when they were at the entrance, it was the people of Tianshan Academy who opened the sealed door. It was said that Jian Qingzhu had commanded it. It also meant that it was Jian Qingzhu who came here and activated all the passages so that they could gather together here. After coming here, everyone focused on the Heavenly Palace and did not talk about anything. They had no idea that the people from the Heavenly Mandate Realm, led by Yi Futian, came earlier than Jian Qingzhu. The people of the Heavenly Mandate Realm and other forces like Yuanyang clan would not disclose this information on their own, as that would only cause more trouble for Yi Futian. Never mind that Jian Qingzhu opened the gate to the ultimate relic. Many notable figures had known his name as the first person among the descendants of Tianshan Academy. Even those who had never heard of him would have heard of him by now when they arrived. If it were not because the god's relic of Heavenly Palace was right before them, the gathering of all of the most excellent figures of the 9 realms would only tempt them to compete against one another. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., Please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1635 Decision. Chapter 1635 Decision. What's the situation? Jian Qingzhu asked those around him, after returning to where Tianshan Academy was positioned. The person next to him shook his head and said, "No one can crack it. I'm afraid that ordinary people can't pass." Those who could come here were all qualified to be called geniuses in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Being considered ordinary was dependent on context. Those powerful cultivators who had gathered in front of them were considered geniuses by the top forces, and were only ordinary in comparison to the best. Jian Qingzhu understood what he meant, and he could also see that it was difficult. Unless top geniuses were willing to render aid in the effort to crack it, there was not much hope. Everyone has arrived. Hasn't anyone tried? Jian Qingzhu looked at the cultivators around him, many of whom he had met before. Several of them were the same extraordinary geniuses, who were also from the Central Emperor realm, just like him. He recognized Shun Hao of the Shun clan, that princess, and several other extraordinary individuals. In addition, not only the Central Emperor realm had arrived this time, other realms within the 9 realms were also represented by their own top talents. The strongest from each realm was bound to be unusually outstanding. Yi Futian, for example, who led his group coming from the east, was not a simple man. Like him, he would be a creator for the history of God's relic. Has anyone here got a clue how to solve the mystery? Jian Qingzhu asked the crowd. As the first person among the descendants of Tianshan Academy, and someone in the Runhuang realm, he exuded an ethereal aura. As soon as he spoke, he attracted everyone's attention. This road is the only way to enter the heavenly palace. This means that we must gain passage through these statues. However, until now, no one could solve the meaning of these statues, said Shun Hao from the Shun clan rather calmly. He stood there with the divine light shining upon him. Well, Jian Qingzhu nodded. It seems that it is not easy to decode the meaning of this statue. But we have here a gathering of many genius talents from the 9 realms. Is there someone who would like to be the first one to give it a shot? Tianshan Academy is the leading institution of all the academies. Its disciples are all colorful figures in their own rights. Not to mention, Brother Jian was also the first person who set foot into the relic, hoping to gain entry first. Why doesn't Tianshan Academy take the lead in solving this mystery? Some cultivator from a top force in the Emperor realm suggested, hoping Tianshan Academy would take the lead in this. I'm not the first person to set foot here, Jian Qingzhu said, and the others didn't seem to pay him any mind. This wasn't important after all. Jian Qingzhu did not bother to explain anything. He merely looked at a young man next to him and said, Ziyu, how about you give it a try? Hearing his words, many became expectant. For those from the top powers of the 9 realms, everyone knew of the reputation of Tianshan Academy as the academy that stood inside the Central Emperor realm. It was known as the premier institution in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. It was only appropriate that disciples from Tianshan Academy would step up in situations such as this. Very well. The young man next to Jian Qingzhu nodded, and then walked toward the ancient path in front of him with countless eyes fastened on him. This young man, Han Ziyu, was a well-known figure in Tianshan Academy. Because of Jian Qingzhu's presence at the academy, Han Ziyu was not as dazzling in comparison. But on the book list at the academy, his ranking was rather high on the list. Above the heavenly palace, as divine might descended, Han Ziyu stepped forward. His long robe fluttered even though there was no wind. The crowd looked at the heavenly palace above, which seemed to be closed despite the fact that it was still quite a distance away. The ancient path in front was about 10 kilometers long, but this was nothing to the cultivators of this realm. As Han Ziyu moved forward, his temperament transcendent, the will of the way was released from his body. He quickly walked in front of a statue, and suddenly a terrible will erupted from it. It was as if there were ancient peaks blasting onto Han Ziyu, but it was also akin to thundering attacks on the spiritual soul. Bang! Han Ziyu's feet planted themselves firmly into the ground. His eyes became extremely sharp as he stared at the statue, and a magnificent spirit exuded from him. Worthy disciple of Tianshan Academy, many who saw him praised him. Indeed, the reputation befitted the man himself. Cultivators of the Divine Palace were also concerned because the Divine Palace was a famous place for cultivation and held a supreme position in the upper heavens realm. However, its reputation in the 9 realms was certainly not superior to Tianshan Academy's. There seemed to be a dazzling and radiant divine light that shot out from the eyes of Xinhao. Yi Futian's eyes also changed. He seemed to be able to look beyond falsehood. He observed that the statue seemed to be able to perceive Han Ziyu's approach, as an extremely overwhelming will emanated from the statue. In the next moment, a terrible will of the way spread and converged between heaven and earth. Birth of illusions, many whispered, staring closely. On the ancient path, some changes were taking place as a suffocating will of the great path appeared. Many could vaguely see a purple radiance, ruinous thunder, and the mountain peaks. It was hard to distinguish between illusions and reality. Yi Futian was able to see it a little more clearly, and saw a region of the great path appeared there. Han Ziyu was enveloped by that region of the great path. That region was closed off by ancient peaks guarding it on all sides, blocking all directions, except for a sliver of the sky above. Dazzling golden divine light fell, and there was also a terrible purple light of destruction that continued shining. Han Ziyu must be under tremendous pressure at this moment, Yi Futian thought. Han Ziyu saw that countless purple divine swords suddenly emerged from the sliver of an opening in the sky, like the sword of the end of days, instantaneous diving towards him. Under the pressure of the great path, he could hardly move. However, he was a talented genius from Tianshan Academy. An extremely sharp divine light flashed through his eyes, and an overpowering will erupted. Suddenly, there were many radiant golden swords that flew toward the sliver in the sky. Click! A violent sound came out, and many did not actually witness the destruction, but heard the terrible sound of the great path instead. Han Ziyu's long hair suddenly loosened and spread out, dancing wildly in the wind. Bang! There was another loud bang, and he continued to retreat. In that illusion he felt that he was extremely small. It was as if he was competing with heaven. No matter how hard he tried, he still could not overcome it. An incredibly strong will of the way burst from him. His eyes were extremely firm, as his will became even more determined. The crowd saw many swords rush out of Han Ziyu's body to illuminate the space he occupied. This genius talent from Tianshan Academy is quite impressive, and his will is tough enough. He's still hanging on, Dozhao said, his eyes turning golden as he saw much more than many others. The divine light of destruction fell down like an illusion, and yet seemed all too real. Accompanied by a loud bang, Han Ziyu spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was quickly weakening. He bowed his head, and dared not look at the statue in front of him. Bang! A wave of divine might blasted on his body and knocked him backward. Jian Qingzhu reached out with his hand, and suddenly, an invisible light blocked Han Ziyu's backward momentum and stopped his fall. Han Ziyu retreated after steadying himself and whispered, "I have failed." The statue's will was far too aggressive. Failure was not surprising. Jian Qingzhu comforted him, and Han Ziyu said nothing more, but simply returned to the crowd from Tianshan Academy. Many felt somewhat disappointed, having witnessed the power of the statue. Han Ziyu from Tianshan Academy had failed, and this was only one of them. It was probably going to be extremely difficult to pass them. Tianshan Academy gave it a shot. Do any of you want to test the remaining will of might in the other statues? Jian Qingzhu asked, eyeing the crowd. Han Ziyu's failure at least shed some light on one of the statues. Since all the cultivators from the 9 realms wanted to enter the imperial palace, it was unreasonable for just Tianshan Academy to do all the heavy lifting. Shen clan will give it a try, Shenhao said. But he did not make the move personally either. Instead, he looked at a cultivator from Shen clan beside him, who took the cue and walked toward another statue. Before he had time to get close, he felt like he was suffocating, and his heart was about to stop beating as well. Similarly, he seemed to have also entered an invisible phantasmal space, where everything had become unreal. After a few moments, he met the same fate as Han Ziyu. In even less time, He was injured and knocked out. After that, many cultivators from various forces tried their best. Most just wanted a taste without letting their most powerful person take the risk, so they had all ended in failure. Each of the 9 statues contains a different will. In order to get through the passage, the will of might from all 9 statues has to be broken at the same time. Jian Qingzhu continued. And in my opinion, it would be difficult for someone to break the will of the 9 statues at the same time. Therefore, I have a suggestion. All the cultivators looked at him, and someone asked, "What suggestion?" Select 9 people from the cultivators of 9 realms, and rush in at the same time, cracking the will of the statues in one fell swoop, Jian Qingzhu said. All previous attempts ended in failure, but Jian Qingzhu wanted all 9 people to walk out with success at the same time, breaking apart the statue's will. But this ambition was not something commoners dared to consider. In the 9 realms, it was not so difficult to find 9 top contenders. How? Someone asked. If there are exactly 9 statues, then each of the 9 realms may choose one representative. If someone thinks that he is more suitable than the others chosen by the other realms, he can fight for the opportunity on the side. Jian Qingzhu asked everyone, how about it? Central Emperor Realm was the strongest among all 9 realms, and had the most top contenders. One position was clearly not enough, so they could compete with the others selected from the other realms. If they thought they were more suitable candidates, they could grab additional positions from the other realms. Obviously, after one attempt, Jian Qingzhu did not plan to continue testing slowly, but wanted to solve the mystery in the most direct way, and enter the sky stairwell. Sounds good. The people from Shen clan nodded and did not disagree. They too wanted to get it over with instead of wasting any more time here. The top figures from Central Emperor Realm are indeed more decisive, Futian thought. If there were any selections from the Heavenly Mandate Realm, there should be no question. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.